You know, we like to think of history as a story that's always been told, a book that we're still writing, but whose early chapters are set in stone. But what if one of the most important chapters was never read? What if it was torn out, and for thousands of years we didn't even know a page was missing? Welcome to Illumination. Today, we're looking for a ghost, a civilization that challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. So, I want you to picture this. A civilization bigger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, covering an area the size of modern-day Western Europe. A society that had mastered things like urban planning and public health at a time when most of the world was, well, still figuring things out. Now imagine it vanished, not just conquered, but completely, erased from human memory. For 3,500 years. That's how long the silence lasted. No stories passed down, no legends of great kings, not a single mention in the texts of other cultures. An entire world, home to millions, just gone. A complete and total void in our history. And that's what's so mind-bending about this. See, we never really lost Egypt, did we? We've always known about the pyramids. We never forgot Mesopotamia. But the Indus Valley Civilization, it rose, it flourished for centuries, and then it fell off a cliff into total obscurity. It wasn't until the 1920s, when railway workers accidentally stumbled upon some ancient bricks, that we even realized it had been there at all. So, once we started digging, what we found wasn't what anyone expected. We're used to finding giant temples, magnificent palaces, and huge statues of powerful kings. But here, the ruins told a very different story. They pointed to a different idea of what makes a civilization great. Just look at the contrast. In Egypt and Mesopotamia, the grandest buildings were for the gods and the kings. The cities grew organically, kind of chaotically. But in the Indus Valley, their most impressive structures were massive public baths and huge granaries to store food for the people. Their cities were laid out on a perfect grid, like a modern city block. They weren't building monuments to power, they were building infrastructure for their citizens. And get this, we're talking about 2500 BCE. Most houses had their own private bathrooms, with toilets that were connected to a city-wide covered sewage system. I mean, some European cities wouldn't have sanitation this sophisticated for another 4,000 years. They even mass-produced standardized bricks. The level of coordination is just astounding. It all comes down to a simple choice, really. In an age of gods and kings, these people chose something else. They chose public health over palaces. They chose sewers over statues. Their priority was the collective good. And that very choice leaves us with this incredible mystery. How do you organize a society of maybe 5 million people spread out over such a vast area with this level of precision without a king? We've looked. There are no grand royal tombs. No giant palaces, no statues of all-powerful rulers. So, who was in charge? You'd think the answer would be in their writing. And yes, they could write. They left behind thousands of inscriptions. But there's a problem. We can see their words, but we are met with a wall of absolute silence. Look at these symbols. They're beautiful, aren't they? So intricate. They're found on these tiny stone seals, on pottery, everywhere. They had a complex written language. They had things they wanted to say, laws, stories, names, prayers, and we can't read a single one. An entire civilization's thoughts are locked away from us. And it's not for a lack of trying, but we've never found anything like a Rosetta Stone. No bilingual text to give us a starting point. And most of the writing we have is incredibly short, just a few symbols at a time. It's like trying to understand all of English by only reading brand logos. And to top it all off, we have no idea what language it even represents. When this civilization vanished, its language and its script vanished with it. And that, right there, is the real tragedy of the Indus Valley. It's an archaeologist's heartbreak. We can walk their streets, we can touch the bricks they made, we can admire their incredible engineering, we can see their cities, but we just can't hear their voices. So we have this amazing, futuristic society, organized in a way we don't understand, speaking a language we can't comprehend. The next big question has to be, where did they all go? How does a world like this just end? Well, the evidence doesn't point to a great war or a sudden disaster. It points to something slower, something more insidious. The leading theory today is climate change. The lifeblood of their civilization was a network of great rivers fed by regular monsoons. And slowly, over time, the climate shifted. The rains became unpredictable. The rivers began to dry up. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow unraveling that took centuries. As the water disappeared and the harvests failed, people simply started to walk away from these magnificent cities. They moved east towards rainier lands in smaller and smaller groups. The great urban experiment just wound down until it faded away completely. Now, you may have heard an older theory about a great Aryan invasion that destroyed them. But the truth is, archaeologists have found almost no signs of a major war. The cities weren't sacked and burned, they were mostly abandoned. It seems this civilization wasn't conquered by an enemy army, it was defeated by its own changing environment. So, what do we do with a story like this? The story of the Indus Valley is more than just ancient history. It's a mirror, and it forces us to question some of the things we take for granted about how the world is supposed to work. Think about it. We assume that to have a large, complex society, you need a powerful king at the top. They show us, maybe you don't. We assume that a great civilization proves its greatness with giant monuments. They proved it with clean water and public granaries. We assume empires are built with armies. They built a trading network that stretched for thousands of miles, with almost no evidence of a military. And that makes you wonder, were they an experiment? A different path that humanity could have taken? A more cooperative, perhaps a more equitable model for how to live together? A model that history just happened to lose? And maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe the silence of the Indus Valley is meant to teach us all a little humility, a reminder that our way of doing things isn't the only way, that our history is incomplete, that whole worlds filled with brilliant ideas can be lost to time. It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? If a civilization of millions can be completely forgotten for over 3 millennia, what else is out there, buried under the sand? What other stories, what other voices have we simply lost? Because what this story tells us is that our history isn't just about what we choose to remember, it's also about what's been lost. And sometimes, the things we've forgotten might be just as important as the things we remember.
I'm Steph, and this has been Illumination.